All right, welcome back for L Scholars. So what we're looking at today is the subjunctive mood. All right, if you haven't yet watched the videos, well, the last few videos on our verb endings and the practice with that, and our review grammar notes on verbs, please stop the video now, go back and watch those first, because that will actually help you a lot with what we're about to look at here. I'll try to keep this nice and short, because after all, I mean, you can read it yourself too, and a lot of this is just me reading it to you, but but do please make sure you see that stuff first before you go on to the subjunctive mood. All right, so with the subjunctive mood, what are we even talking about here? Well, all verbs in Latin and English have four possible moods, okay? And the subjunctive is the last of them. We know the other three. One normal misconception is that mood has something to do with like how you feel during the verb itself, like what's going on in the sentence, how it makes you feel. That is not true. In fact, this comes from the word mood comes from Latin modus, which just means way or manner or mode. So the mood of the verb is the manner in which the speaker thinks of the action happening. All right, and there are four options for that. The first is the indicative, which is the basic form. Most verbs are indicative. It just shows real actions that have or have not happened, right? So it's right there in the name. It indicates that something happens, right? An action occurs or doesn't occur, but it's describing a definite action. Okay. The next mood that we learned a while ago is the imperative, the command form, right? Like an imperator, the emperor commands you to do stuff, right? So the imperative is the command form. One verb that most people are familiar with that is a command in Latin is salve, like hello. You're literally telling someone to be well. So salve or salvete, if it's more than one person, that's an imperative. Okay, the next mood that we learned back in the day was the infinitive, right? And we talked about this a lot in the other lessons. So the infinitive is the basic idea of the action itself, right? The general idea. So it's the to form, right? To verb or not to verb. That is the infinitive, right? So to run, to eat, to laugh, to sing, etc. And in Latin, I just added here on the right, this is the RE form, right? The second principal part of the verb that ends in RE, that's the infinitive form. Okay, now to the mood we're talking about today, the subjunctive. The subjunctive is used for unreal or hypothetical, ideal, potential actions, all right? Today we're not going to worry too much about how you translate it, although we'll give some English examples, but really, in Latin especially, the way you translate the subjunctive actually has a lot to do with the clause that it shows up in, right? The sentence chunk that it's in. Whereas, we're not going to get into that. Today we're just going to worry mostly about the forms that it takes, what it looks like, how you make it. Okay, but just really quick, just to give you an idea, in English, we have the subjunctive too, but we use what are called modal auxiliary verbs to express subjunctive ideas. So I have a couple of sentences here. The first three are not the subjunctive, and the second three, or I guess the 4, 5, 6, these are in the subjunctive. Okay, so the first example here, Megan will study verb conjugations. Okay, this is indicative because it indicates the happening of an action, right? Next one, study the verb conjugations, Matthew. This is the imperative, right? You're telling someone to do it. Okay. The third one, does Denise like to study verb conjugations? That's the infinitive, right? To verb or not to verb, that is the infinitive. All right, the next ones are subjunctive though, and try and listen to how they sound different. Nathaniel would study the verb conjugations if he weren't so busy. See that would study? That's kind of a subjunctive idea. Next one, I may give a quiz on the verb conjugations tomorrow. Well, depending on when you watch this video, that might be true. That's a subjunctive. You see how it's not I will, it's I may, I might, I could, right? Last one, should we study the third conjugation or the fourth? That's also subjunctive. So again, in English, you'll start hearing all the time these modal auxiliary verbs like should, could, might, would, may, might. These kind of words. I think I said might twice. Anyway, but English uses modal auxiliaries, whereas Latin just uses a couple different letters to change the whole mood of the verb. All right. And I kind of said all this already, so I'll just let you read it on your own. But basically, I just want you to know that the subjunctive comes from the Latin word subjungo, which means to join stuff together. Because in Latin, most of the time, most of the uses of the subjunctive, you might translate them as should, could, would, might, all that. But its meaning, like I said earlier, depends on the different clauses that you cram together. Right, that you join together, that you jungo together. All right, and we'll worry about that a little bit later on. Okay, this is just a little bit about knowing how to translate a subjunctive. Again, I mean, first and foremost, you have to know what the subjunctive forms are, which we're going to look at in just a minute, and be able to recognize the various types of clauses according to these sort of rules here. Again, we're not going to get into this right now because we're not going to really translate any of them today. All right, so we'll start with the present tense of the subjunctive on the next page. First, we're going to look at the forms, then we'll see how we make them. Okay, so first things first, we're looking at the present subjunctive today. There are 4 tenses of the subjunctive. We're just going to look at the present active subjunctive, actually present passive too in a bit. But the present subjunctive is one of the 4 tenses of it. So here are all the forms. If you'd like to pause and copy these down, that would be a great idea. But what I want you to notice is, at first, we have 5 different verbs here divided into the 4 conjugations. Okay? Remember from lessons a couple days ago, you can tell what conjugation a verb is by looking at the second principal part, chopping off the RE, and then looking at your stem vowel. If your stem vowel is an A, it's first conjugation. If it's a long E, it's second. If it's a short E, it's third. And if it's a long I, it's fourth. Now, one thing we haven't gotten into in any of our lessons this year so far is that there's this other category called third IO verbs. The reason they're called third IO verbs is, well, the first person singular present ends in IO. That's where they get the name. But more importantly, if you look at the second principal part and chop off the RE, they're third conjugation, and there's no way out of that because short E equals third conjugation. Thing is, a lot of their forms actually have this I in it because they act an awful lot like fourth conjugation. And actually the subjunctive is one of those places. Because if you look, the endings are exactly the same from third IO to fourth. Okay, now one thing you'll see here is, with the exception of the first person singular, okay, the endings, the very last letter or 3, are exactly the same as the regular present active indicative endings that you've known for a long time, right? If you think of the present tense endings, you probably automatically rattle off OST, mus, tis, enti. OST, mus, tis, enti. Well, aside from the first one, ST, mus, tis, enti. ST, mus, tis, enti. All right, so instead of O here, we have M. But if you think back, you'll remember, to our last video with the verb chart. Excuse me. Sometimes, instead of O for the first person singular, you have M. Like in the imperfects, right? Bomb, boss, bot. Bomb is bot is bond. So sometimes in first person singular, you'll have that M. And here's one of those spots. So other than that, you have OST, mus, tis, enti. Regular old present tense ending, nothing you haven't learned already. The thing that does change, though, is the stem vowel for each conjugation. right? The reason I made such a big deal out of looking at the stem vowels here is because in the subjunctive, the present subjunctive, well, the way you know it's the present subjunctive is when you conjugate it, your stem vowel changes in a regular way, in a normal, predictable way. What that means is every single time you can go back and forth from indicative to subjunctive in the present tense just by changing the stem vowel back and forth. Okay? So just a little reminder here, how you get your stem vowel. I just told you, chop up the RE off the infinitive. Okay? So here's a handy chart to look at for memorizing what that sound change is, what that vowel change looks like and sounds like. All right? From a video or two past, when we looked at what verb conjugations look like and identifying a verb conjugation, you remember that, like I said earlier, long A, it's first conjugation. Long E, it's second. Short E, it's third. Long I, it's fourth. And then we have this weird kind of in-between group of third IOs. And if you have a third IO, that E turns into IA. Okay? So this change from A to E, E to EA, E to A, I to IA, this is normal and predictable every single time. Okay? So you want to memorize this. I guarantee it'll be on our next quiz, but even aside from that, this is never going to change. You need to memorize this. So how will you memorize it? Well, a lot of people like to use mnemonic devices for these kind of things. Your book, Wheelock's Latin, likes this one. And by the way, mnemonic device is just a little phrase that helps you memorize, the letters certain things stand for, right? So for this change, you can memorize she wears a giant tiara. Right? What the heck does that mean? Well, look here. She wears a giant tiara. All right? That'll help you memorize them, not just what they are, but in order, right? Because first, second, third IO, fourth. Okay? Feel free to make your own. I mean, you don't have to use this one. This is just the one that your book likes. But just make sure if you make up your own, A, you'll remember it, and B, it keeps the pattern the same. Okay? One more quick little thing I just wanted to point out is that you can do the subjunctive in the passive too, present passive subjunctive. You do the exact same thing as we just did, except instead of your OST, most his enti endings, you use passive endings. Are, ristor, more, mini, intor. All right, so again, you can look at this chart here, and this is what the present passive subjunctive will look like. Okay, that A becomes an E, short E becomes EA, or excuse me. Long E becomes EA, short E becomes short A, and then IO looks like fourth. Fourth is long I into IA, right? So I'll even put those above here just to remind you of the stem vowel, especially because I misspoke. Okay. An asterisk because these are third IOs, but they're third conjugation, and long I. Okay? So I'm not going to spend a ton of time looking at that, but that should give you an idea. The endings are, ristor, more, mini, intor. Are, ristor, more, mini, intor. Right? The passive endings can go right on the stem. Just remember that you change the stem based on what conjugation the verb is. And finally, just wanted to show you this real quick. It's really easy to mistake the subjunctive for an indicative if you don't know your verb conjugations. If you don't know if it's first or second or third or fourth. Remember, you have to memorize this when you learn new words. So I just wanted to show you a couple of conjugated verbs next to each other here to show you that, laudent, this is present subjunctive, because this comes from the verb laudo, laudare, laudavi, laudatum, and that A became an E, right? But monent and agent, Well, this is a second conjugation and a third conjugation. Well, these are just regular old indicative, right? So you're not going to know that unless you memorize it, okay? But you need to know that to know how the stem vowel is, okay? Look at the second one here. Laudas. Well, laudas, laudo, laudare, laudavi, laudatum. You know, OST was tisenti, stem vowel stays the same. This is a regular old indicative. Whereas, you know, something like ago, agere, if you have agas, well, that short E became an A, right? She wears a giant tiara. Well, this is subjunctive, okay? And then, for that matter, laudes versus ages. Well, again, laudo, laudare, laudavi, laudatum, the A becomes an E, so this is subjunctive. Well, this is the same verb here, ago, agere, agiactum. This is a regular old indicative, okay? So, I just wanted to show you that really quick, just to remind you that you need to memorize your verb conjugations. You need to be able to identify, okay? There's already been at least one assignment where you just look at the conjugation itself, and you can tell just by looking at the principal parts. There's going to be more and more of that as we go. So make sure you're doing those, and the quiz will have some of that as well. All right, thank you for watching, scholars. And again, as always, if you have any questions, please let me know. And you know, if you haven't watched the previous lessons, make sure you do that too. Remember, these lessons are class, right? This is from class time. So whether you're in school or out of school, make sure you're watching all the videos. All right, thanks for watching. I will talk to you soon.